Hello, this is the European History Lecture for Monday. No, not Monday. Friday. Woo! The 30th of April, 2021. It is the 30th, yes. And where we were was that the powers that be in Germany, a bunch of political and business leaders, convinced President von Hindenburg to appoint Adolf Hitler to set up a government. Now, the reasoning behind this was that Hitler's party had been growing in the Reichstag, the German parliament, election by election. And they, again, were having a series of panic elections. The only other party that was growing this way was the Communist Party. And the fear was that the Communists would be able to stage a revolution because so many Germans are terrified of starvation, which, if you're going to be afraid of something, being afraid of starvation is reasonable. So Hitler's party had been growing. Oddly enough, in the final election before this appointment, the Nazis actually took a little bit of a dip. So there are a bunch of historians who talk about picking Hitler just after he was at his most popular. But in any case, the idea is we're going to inoculate ourselves. Please do make sure you have your notes out. We're going to inoculate ourselves against communist socialism by appointing a national socialist. And that national socialist will be capable of convincing the people that the government's doing all it can to keep them fed. But at the same time, this wild, crazy demagogue that nobody expects to be anything other than a pushover is going to be ours, the elite says, to control. This is what some people... I don't like making comparisons between President Trump and Chancellor Hitler because, first of all, I voted for President Trump, but also I think that far too many people mistook style for substance, and they saw in Trump somebody who was Hitler-like in style. I did think that in 2016. I was convinced otherwise. Fair enough. Live and learn. But there were people in the Republican Party establishment who at first thought that Trump was a buffoon and a demagogue. A demagogue is a person who says whatever he needs to get the support of the people. Lies, distorts, baits, whatever's necessary, he'll pander to the people. And he does so with such style that the people just go along with it because they're led by their emotions. When they realized that Trump was not biddable, was not the kind of man that was going to take guidance from these wise old Republican leaders, they turned on him. And in two elections, they ended up supporting Clinton and Biden against Trump, including former President George W. Bush, a man who I voted for twice, because they didn't think that he was controllable. And control is what establishment politicians are all about. This was true in Germany also. They thought they could control Corporal Hitler. Did not know who they were dealing with. And the result was Nazi Germany. So Hitler is appointed, and a few short weeks after becoming prime minister, the Reichstag is burned down. A communist is blamed for the arson. There are many historians who believe it's so convenient for the Nazis that the Parliament of Germany's building burns down. It incenses Germans across the political spectrum that so much that they grant Hitler emergency powers. There are people who believe that Hitler's people burned the building down. I'm not sure what I believe. I think that Hitler, above all else, like all predators, is an opportunist. And he saw an opportunity with the burning of the Reichstag that he didn't let go to waste. Whether his people did it or not, I don't know. Their criminal justice system said a communist did it. In any event, with the burning of the Reichstag, Hitler is granted emergency powers. This is a peculiarity of the Weimar Constitution. Yes?
I was just wondering if there was ever a trial or anything for it, and
Yeah,
was he ever, suspected of anything, or at the time was it just kind of
The man who was convicted was basically arrested. Evidence was there in the court that said it was him, but it was a court dominated by National Socialists. So I always suspect court proceedings in countries that are ruled by one party dictatorships, and Germany was in the process of becoming one. So I don't know. I don't know whether the man was guilty. He might have been. Look, sometimes things just happen and people do horrible things. Um, is it always part of a conspiracy? It is totally possible that this guy, an angry communist who saw the Nazis as bad, decided to strike a blow against the new government by burning down the building. It's entirely possible he did that. Um, I don't know. I have my suspicions. I share them with you, but the historical record said that the communists did it. The Weimar Constitution, like the Roman Republic's constitution, acknowledges that there are crises where normal government can't work. This right there is a danger sign. If you believe in a Republican form of government, then you have to accept that that government can handle good times and bad, that that government can deal with crises as they come. But the Romans, who lived in a much more acutely dangerous time than ours, at least in terms of frequent wars and unexpected calamities, and they didn't have the technological or economic wherewithal that we do. The Romans acknowledged that there were times when just things were unpredictably bad, and you needed one voice, one will, one leader. So they established the office of dictator. But they were very, very careful to limit that term to 6 months or until the crisis ended, whichever came sooner. During that 6 month term, up to 6 months, a Roman dictator could establish any kind of policy he wanted, and the government and the people of Rome would have to go along with it. If he said that every Thursday you have to wear pickles in your beard, then every Thursday you have to wear pickles in your beard. I think the Romans had beards at that point, but never mind. It's just what came to mind. I guess I got pickle juice in my beard the other day, and it's traumatic. So the idea is that during the crisis, the dictator can dictate. But after the crisis, the dictator is absolutely liable to be sued by anyone who thinks that the dictator violated the Roman Constitution, which is the normal spirit of Roman law. And if the dictator did, he can actually be convicted. So a dictator knows, number one, it's a very short term of service. Number two, he is accountable for every decision he makes before the law. He can justify it by saying, look, in this state of emergency, we needed to wear pickles in our beards. But if he can't convince the Senate or the jury, he's going to be punished. The problem with the Weimar Constitution is, like the Roman Republic, it allows for a dictatorship in an emergency. There are massive wildfires and floods, and there's a Russian invasion and a French invasion, and you don't have time for speeches in parliaments, as Bismarck once complained. So you appoint a strongman to take care of everything. But the Weimar Constitution did not hardcore specify limits on how long the dictatorship was to last. Nor did they specify specifics on under what conditions the dictatorship would be returned. The assumption was that, like Cincinnatus, the greatest dictator in human history, he would be appointed, do the job, and then leave voluntarily, because no sane person wants that kind of power. But Adolf Hitler is not Cincinnatus. So what happened was the Constitution had a loophole that allowed the establishment of a state of emergency without a finite endpoint, which means that Hitler was going to maintain that state of emergency up until the moment he shot himself in 1945. So it becomes a permanent state of emergency, all thanks to the Reichstag fire. Now, President Hindenburg, when Hitler is appointed chancellor, treats him with contempt. He was the field marshal. He ran Germany with Ludendorff during the last couple years of the war. He's a Prussian aristocrat. He was famous before World War One. And this little trench corporal is coming along, this jumped up guy that everyone shouts Heil to. But Hindenburg was very old. His health was failing, and his mind was beginning to wander. So Hitler basically stayed out of Hindenburg's way while he did what he wanted to do. And Hindenburg, either because he didn't have the energy or the mental acuity, or because he thought that this was what we hired Hitler to do, to manage this crisis, Hindenburg didn't get too involved in Hitler's stuff. He allowed Hitler to do what Hitler was going to do. And then Hindenburg dies. With Hindenburg's death, we have a turning point. Any pretense towards constitutional government is abandoned when the office of president is abolished. I was going to say demolished, but no, abolished. And instead, the Chancellor of Germany, Adolf Hitler, was named Reichsführer, imperial leader. Reich being empire, Führer being leader. Reichsführer and Reich Chancellor, imperial leader and imperial chancellor, all wrapped up in one, along with commander-in-chief of the military, with emergency powers. So the government is reflecting the slogan that the Nazis had, Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. Ein Volk, one people. The word folk is similar to our word folk. And their word folk means the German nation, the spirit of the German nation, and the body of the German nation, embodied by the people of Germanic ancestry. Ein Volk, ein Reich, one empire. The word Reich means empire. For reasons of politics, during the Weimar years, the German Republic was still called an empire, even though the emperor didn't exist. It was politics. And Hitler called his regime the Third Reich. The First Reich is the German Holy Roman Empire. Charlemagne crowned Western Roman Emperor in the year 800, and for the next 1,000 years, until Napoleon in the very early 1800s abolishes the Holy Roman Empire. That's the First Reich. The Second Reich is the empire established by Otto von Bismarck and that ended at the end of World War I. The Second Reich was very short-lived, basically from 1871 until 1918, a couple of generations. Then there was the Weimar Republic. Hitler's Third Reich is the Third Empire that he claimed would last for 1,000 years, the 1,000-year Reich. So, eine Volk, one people. Ein Reich, one empire. Eine Führer, one leader. So this is the leader principle, the Führerprinzip. The leader principle that says that we are naturally hierarchical beings and that the best form of government is, by any other name, an absolute monarchy with a good king. In other words, a dictatorship where the dictator is a wise and able fellow who's going to rule in everyone's best interests without compromise. The Führerprinzip, the leadership principle, is something that the Nazis try establishing throughout the society so that everyone is either in command or under command. And the principle of command is this mystical, romantic thing which involves inspiring and leading and controlling people. And it is the ultimate expression of Nietzschean supermandom in that you have your willpower not only strong enough to dominate your own body and your own life, but your willpower is strong enough to dominate the lives of others, the minds of others, the bodies of others. That's the leadership principle. However, Hitler didn't have everything yet. The German army still was its own entity. And the army was run by a bunch of Prussian aristocratic officers who'd gone to the military academy at Zossen and who really didn't like Hitler, didn't trust Hitler. And there were some reasons for this. The biggest reason that the army distrusted Adolf Hitler and the Nazis was the Sturmabteilung. The Sturmabteilung, the SA, I'm using the German pronunciation of A, are the brown-shirted political thugs, the stormtroopers. And these brown-shirted political thug stormtroopers not only had engaged in street battles with the communists, in Hitler's early years, they would break into Jewish shops and they'd stand out of Jewish shops during boycotts. And anyone who wanted to go in and shop at a Jewish bakery or a Jewish grocer had to get past an angry looking stormtrooper who might very well accidentally. There was that fear. That was intimidation. Why aren't you shopping at German markets? Why aren't you buying German baked goods? What are you, a Jew lover? So these guys were thugs and bullies. They weren't sharp, most of them. And they were led by a former World War I army captain named Ernst Röhm. Ernst Röhm was a combat veteran who had contempt for Hitler because, yeah, Hitler was a trench soldier for all those years. Röhm was a trench soldier for all those years, but he was an officer. He led men into battle. He didn't just run around giving messages. Still, officially, Hitler was in charge. Röhm was also a widely known homosexual who enjoyed recruiting beautiful young men and seducing them. And this was an open secret within the party. It's something that the party tried to hush up because in 1920s and 1930s Germany, that wouldn't fly. But Röhm had the ambition of replacing the old Prussianized German army with a people's army, a Volkssturm. And that people's army was the Sturmabteilung, the SA. What Röhm wanted to do was get rid of the army and replace it with the Nazi brown shirts. And the army was afraid that Hitler would actually try to do it. It was a plausible threat to them. So how does Hitler get the army on his side? He makes a choice. Do I choose these brown shirts who've been fighting street battles for me since I since I became leader of the Nazi Party? Do I stick with Ernst Röhm, who I owe because he's helped me in times of need, and antagonize the one armed group in Germany that might be able to overthrow me? And it would. Or do I prove to the army that I am a responsible leader of the nation by getting rid of these old Nazi cronies? I'm going to get rid of the old Nazi cronies. And what is set up is called the Night of the Long Knives. The Night of the Long Knives is in the hands of the SS, the Schutzstaffel, the guard force. The SS didn't wear brown shirts. They wore black shirts. In fact, they wore a beautiful black uniform designed by Hugo Boss, the real Hugo Boss, the namesake of the fashion house that still exists today. And these stylish black uniforms made evil look good. The Schutzstaffel was led by a former pig farmer and the son of a school teacher, Heinrich Himmler, who his contemporaries thought was the decent one, the decent Nazi, which is ironic considering the worst crimes against humanity committed by the Nazis were perpetrated by the SS under Hitler's command. But he was the decent one. In any event, the SS were given secret orders that on a particular summer night, all of the leaders of the SA were going to be at a hotel at a convention. The SS was going to come in the wee hours of the morning and arrest them all and kill a bunch of them. In fact, the Night of the Long Knives was not only going to be a time when Ernst Röhm and the SA were dealt with, but any other political grudge that you might have, just put them on the list, and the SS will take care of them. Joseph Goebbels, the small Nazi propaganda minister, was hated so much by some of the other Nazi leaders that he ended up hiding out with Hitler because he was convinced that the SS would come for him if he was vulnerable on the night of the long knives. He knew what was coming, and he basically made sure that he didn't go out of eyesight of Adolf Hitler during that entire time. On the night of the long knives, the SS performed like a well-oiled machine. They decapitate the SA. Rome is found in flagrante delicto with one of his young soldiers, yanked out of bed, brought to a jail cell, and shot. A number of the other SA leaders are just taken out and shot. The next day, it's announced that there was a plot to overthrow the government, and these people, the SA leadership, and another number of other Nazis and non-Nazis throughout Germany, had been shot in the course of trying to rebel. At this point, it becomes obvious to everyone who is watching that the German government is no longer even pretending to be constitutional in the way it applies law. When you have a political police like the SS acting as judge, jury, and executioner, when they have death lists, when they become a death squad, you no longer have any pretense of the rule of law, which means that your rights don't exist. Whatever rights the Constitution says you have, it's just pillow talk, baby. It's not real. It's a lie. And basically, Hitler is blatant enough about it, as if to say, yeah, we murdered these people. What are you going to do about it? We've got all the guns. We've got the government on our side. We've got the law on our side. We are the law. We are the law. So he not only gets away with it, but that act demonstrates to the army that Hitler chose them, and Hitler is going to really boost their defense budget because he's going to rearm Germany. So the generals realize that in Hitler they have a partner that they can work with.
I'm just wondering, when does the methamphetamine sort of factor into the military? Because wasn't there they were injecting people and then Hitler was possibly using on his own?
As I understand it, the German military during the Second World War experimented with using caffeine and cocaine type stimulants on their troops in battle, on certain troops in battle. It was not universal. Although caffeine and chocolate were. At the Battle of Stalingrad, the rations that were prioritized above all others were dense chocolate bars and coffee. Because the idea is you can keep fighting if you have coffee and chocolate. And those were jazzed up a little bit. SS troops were sometimes jazzed up with these drugs. And it was designed to make them very, very scary men. And the kind of, look, I was a security guard in a hospital in New Haven, Connecticut, as I was working my way through college. I did that in the summer. And on my second or third night on the job, this guy comes in, jumped up on PCP, and is brought into the emergency room, and somebody asks his name, and he starts swinging. And this man felt no pain. It took 8 of us to get him down on the ground and hold him down until his acceleration petered out. There are cases where somebody is on PCP and they're shot and they have a mortal wound, but they don't know it yet. They're just going on adrenaline, and they literally go until their heart is no longer pumping blood through their veins. So there was some experimentation with that during the war, and there was some effect. But it wasn't the reason that Germany won so many battles early on. It was a supplementary factor. As to Hitler, Hitler was a vegetarian and a non-smoker. He loved dogs and he loved children. This was all in the propaganda. But his diet was lousy. He was suffered from terminal flatulence because of that. What that meant was he had horrible gas, and he just let go all the time. It was just bad. But as he got older, as the war got on, and especially after the assassination attempt in 1944, where he was subject to a bomb blast that he survived, he was on an increasing cocktail of narcotics prescribed by his personal physician. His personal physician was widely considered by other Nazi leaders to be a quack, but Hitler trusted him. and there was cocaine and other things, other stimulants, as part of the daily injections that he took. It is entirely reasonable to say that certainly during the last 9 months of the war, after his assassination attempt, that Hitler was jumped up constantly on drugs. And even before that, he did take medication that might have altered his mental state. But until the assassination, the other Nazi leaders didn't see signs of it. After that, they did, but they weren't going to do anything about it.
I think there is a whole, I don't know if it's a urban legend or whatever, that the Nazi scientists were the ones who came up with the chemical formula for methamphetamine.
It's entirely possible. I don't know. But they did all sorts of experiments on Jews, on gypsies, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, devout Christians. Basically, anyone in their concentration camps that they wanted, they would pluck for human experimentation.
There was a thing that the Nazi scientists did because they had quite a while, and they were experimenting mostly with war stuff. This is outside of the genetic stuff. They created a chemical substance that I can't remember the actual name of it, but it has something like with chlorine, and it's considered a chemical weapon, and you put it in a flamethrower, and you put it down, and once it's lit on fire, it melts concrete. It burns at like 1,200 degrees Celsius.
And that would be a dangerous weapon to use.
It melted the flamethrower as they used
it. Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, they couldn't actually, because it was so dangerous, they couldn't mass produce it. Even the barrels they kept it in, lit it on fire.
Interesting. If you find out the name of the chemical, let me know.
Okay.
That is interesting. The Germans were very great experimenters during the Second World War, during the First War, too. Anyway, so Hitler demonstrates to the army that he's worth following. And within a month or two, every soldier and officer of the German army that existed swore an oath. I'm not going to do the oath, I'm going to quote it. I swear by God to be loyal unto death to the Imperial Chancellor and the Imperial leader, Adolf Hitler. They swear a loyalty oath, not like our politicians and soldiers do, to the Constitution of their country, not to the flag of their country, not to the people or government of their country. They swear an oath of loyalty personally to Adolf Hitler. And if you ever wonder why they fight to the death for Hitler, up until the point where Germany is a wreck, they fight on after Hitler shoots himself for a while. It's because to a German, an oath is a powerful, real thing. It's not just talk. It's life. It is the basis of their honor. When they pledge, period, regardless of circumstance. And the result is that the Germans who know that Hitler is dangerous have great difficulty getting any help from the army. There is a group within the army that tries working against him. But whenever they go outside of their small circle, they hit a wall because of this oath. Hitler is like a demon that possesses the German army through this loyalty oath. And all new soldiers that come in swear that self-same oath to Adolf Hitler personally. So he now has the military establishment behind him, and there is no one who can stand against him. No one. The business leaders of Germany are paid off by massive profits. Hitler keeps the workers and the labor unions under his control, so the workers get some things, but the businesses get what they need, which is profits and the essential control over their business, with this exception. It's the same bargain that the Chinese Communist Party has made since the 1970s with their people. You can get stinking rich. You can have wonderful businesses as long as you toe the party line, as long as you are absolutely in thought, word, and deed in harmony with the Communist Party of China. Hitler insists on the same thing. So you can be a Ferdinand Porsche who runs the auto company that produces Porsches and Volkswagens. You can be a Willy Messerschmitt who runs the aircraft and major company in the aircraft industry. You could be any number of these business leaders with your chemical businesses or your banking houses. It doesn't matter. You have the option of reaping major profits. You can play with that money because money is fun if you have it to play with, but you will not stray an iota from what Hitler and the Nazi Party demand of you. So they're not free. They're rich, they're powerful, but only so long as they say yes to the great leader. And it works. Business is also brought into organizations called cartels, which are dominated by the Nazi Party leadership. So all chemical producers are part of the chemical cartel, all steel producers are part of the steel cartel, and so on and so forth. And the Nazi Party runs them. Now, the Nuremberg Laws of 1935 are the legal basis for everything that happens with race and other things in Germany. How are you going to define a Jew? Is a Jew a practicing Orthodox believer? Are they the Hasidim, the ones with the long curls and the black? They look a bit like Amish, big beards. They wear black, they wear white, they wear old-fashioned clothing. Or are Jews also the modern practitioners, sort of liberal Jews who dress and look like Germans but go to synagogue? Or are Jews an ethnic group? And if they are an ethnic group, how do you define who's Jewish? Well, they go to the United States for an answer. In the South, the Jim Crow laws that were set up after the Southern states were given self-government again. I'll give you a quick reminder. We fight a civil war, among other things, to free the slaves. Lincoln does this in the Emancipation Proclamation. He's assassinated, but in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, the Southern states are governed by the U.S. Army. In those states, provisional governments are set up under new rules that allow blacks as well as whites to vote. The Army makes sure that the blacks vote. As a result, you have black congressmen, you have black politicians, as well as white politicians. And the old school Confederate politicians are banned from office. So in the immediate aftermath of the American Civil War, Southern states are governed by both the Army and by people who they consider to be slaves and sympathizers with the slaves, and Northerners who come south called carpetbaggers who tried to run Southern states. But in the 1870s, the federal army is withdrawn. Can you have a free society at bayonet point? The federal government of the United States in the 1870s pulls out, says the Southern states are as reconstructed as they're going to be, and they get self-government again. And the moment they get self-government, they establish Jim Crow laws, which are laws that are designed to prevent blacks from voting. So one of the reasons why we don't insist that people know how to read and write before they vote is because the Jim Crow laws use the idea of a literacy test. And what they do is they give Bubba and his good old boys a really simple thing to read that they told them. You know, it says, the bluebird in the field chirps a lot. So, you know, they did come in, yeah, the bluebird in the field chirps a lot. But for blacks, they'd have this thing from Shakespeare that the blacks would have to read. Most blacks, being just recently slaves, did not have that education. So the idea was to use literacy tests, among other things, to bar blacks from voting, and it worked. But there were a bunch of other laws that basically segregated everything. How do you determine who's black? Well, the Jim Crow law says if you have a single black grandparent, you're black. You're a quadroon. Half black, half white is a mulatto. Quarter black, the old term, is a quadroon. You're a quarter black. Therefore, under the law, you're black. The Nazis take this idea and say if you have a Jewish grandparent, you're Jewish. Jewish is not defined as a religious practice. It is defined as an ethnic group. So if you have a grandparent that was part of the ethnic group or the religious group of Judaism, you're going to be treated like a full-blooded Jew. Now, Jews are stripped from citizenship. Jews are stripped from their voting rights, their rights to free speech and free assembly. They are stripped of the right to have property over a certain amount. They are stripped of the right to work in certain professions. No more Jewish teachers, no more Jewish doctors working on Gentile patients, no more Jewish lawyers, no more Jewish soldiers or officers, no more Jewish police, no more Jewish politicians. Gone out of those professions. Jews are going to have no ability to maintain relationships or marriages with non-Jews. Everyone who's been married to a Jew is now in some degree of trouble. And the property rights that Jews have and the rights to live in certain areas that Jews have as a German citizen, they're all gone. The property is shrunk year by year, the amount of property a Jew is allowed to possess. So one result of this is that Jews are forced to sell their homes, their businesses, their boats, their automobiles, whatever assets they have above this maximal figure that keeps shrinking year by year. And they have no ability to sell in a normal way. They're desperate, and everyone knows it. Now, Hitler personally has all sorts of evil in him, but he's not money-oriented. He's not corrupt that way. So he doesn't profit. But everyone around him targets which Jews they want to shake down. And suddenly the Nazi leaders own 3, 4, 5, 6 mansions. They own businesses, they own land, they own boats, they own mines, they own assets. Because if you're in a bidding war with one of the Nazi leaders in Nazi Germany, you don't want to win. And you don't want to drive up the price. So once people realized that the Nazi leaders were swooping in on a particular Jewish property, everyone else stepped away because they didn't want to get stepped on. So the Jews are stripped of all of their rights, their ability to make a living, their ability to associate. If a Jewish man was caught alone in a room with a Gentile woman, the assumption was that a rape took place. And as a result, the man might be tried and convicted, sterilized or imprisoned or killed, depending upon the circumstances, because all relations between Jews and non-Jews were forbidden. It didn't happen quickly. It happened slowly. And although the Nuremberg Laws started out, they were pretty comprehensive. They got more and more and more fulsome, and they were more and more fully enforced. Reverend Martin Niemöller, a Christian minister, a Protestant minister, and an anti-Nazi, famously says, "First they came for the Jews, but I wasn't a Jew. But I said nothing because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the trade unionists, but I said nothing because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the communists, but I said nothing because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." By allowing another person's rights to be taken away, you set the stage for somebody to take your own rights away. There is no such thing as a little infringement of freedom. If you allow by your silence the infringement of freedom, the restriction of human rights, the definition of human dignity to smaller and smaller numbers of people, based on an ideology, you are setting yourself up to be its victim. Sooner or later, they'll come for you. Because no one is going to escape the question, are you pure enough? Are you a pure enough person? Are you able to withstand the scrutiny of us when we don't want this, that, or the other type of person? Are your thoughts pure enough? Are your intentions pure enough? What bothers me so much about the cancel culture and speech controls is that the methods are precisely out of Nazi Germany. We don't have laws yet, but when common culture can have a Twitter mob get you fired because you said some things they don't agree with, you don't have free speech. You have the rule by a mob. And at times, we're teetering towards that. You can't sit by and watch as the rights of others are taken away. History shows again and again that if you do that, sooner or later, they'll come for you. In the case of the mentally handicapped, I'm going to ask you to close the shades and shut the lights off, and I'm going to have a clip for you to watch.